So great looking out over all of you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker, Don Tapscott. Don is a leader in innovative thinking around technology in today's modern world. He's written 15 popularly read books. But what you probably don't know is that he's a member of a band called Men in Suits. They've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for numerous charities. And he plays his music on a 1936 Hammond B keyboard. Please join me in welcoming to the Impact stage, Don Tapscott. Thank you, Don.
That was great, Bernie. Oh, that's funny. We used to do a concert every year, whether our public demanded it or not. But then we got good. That music that they were playing when we came on is our new song. Now, it's not been released yet, but it's a hip-hop song. And these are all bankers, except for me. Anyway, we have a lot of fun, and we've raised lots of money for good causes. Bernie, that was a pretty great setup for what I have to say today. In the next little under an hour, I'm going to try and dig in with a bit of detail to convince you that technology is changing, demographics are changing. That means you're changing customer and employee. The business environment is changing, the global economy is changing, and companies that understand these changes have a chance of succeeding in this crazy new environment. For those of you who are on Twitter, by the way, I'm at DTapscott, and the hashtag is Schwab Impact, #SchwabImpact. Let's get into it. Some of you may have read this book. It's a book I wrote in the end of 2006 called Wikinomics. And Wikinomics was about the corporation. We argued that the internet is not about hooking up online, creating a gardening community, websites, eyeballs, stickiness, clicks, page views, or anything like that. But rather, it's a global computational platform. It's a big computer that we all use. And this is leading to a profound change in the nature of the corporation, in the way that we orchestrate capability in our economy to innovate, to create goods and services, to engage with the rest of the world. And at the heart of this is entrepreneurship, because little companies can now have all the capability of big companies without the main liabilities, deadening bureaucracy, legacy cultures, systems, and so on. And it's all good news for you, because these are the halcyon days of entrepreneurship that we're entering into. Now, I was very pleased with the book. It was actually the best-selling management book in the US for the whole year, and then something happened. We had the meltdown of the global financial industry. I mean, who would have imagined 5 years ago that one of the big themes of business books and magazine articles these days would be how to save capitalism, or is capitalism even savable? And these books are not being written by Occupy types. They're being written by the capitalists, people like Matthew Bishop, business editor of The Economist. Now, do you know this guy, Paul Krugman, writes the New York Times, Nobel Prize winning economist? For some reason, he's preceded me on the stage at some talks recently, and he gets up and he says, look, when you have the meltdown of a financial industry, you get a prolonged period of slump. He said Japan had one in 1992, and they're still in a slump. So get ready for a couple of decades of ugliness in the global economy. And that's the good news scenario, he says, because some really bad things can happen. Like, what if Spain or Italy defaults on its sovereign debt, and Germany, Angela Merkel, doesn't come in and backstop the euro, Europe collapses, the whole global economy goes into a depression. So I get up on the stage and I look out at this sea of people in a fetal position. And I say, look, far be it from me to debate a Nobel Prize winning economist, but I have a slightly different view. I think that the future is not something to be predicted. The future is something to be achieved. And we can achieve a very different future in the world than the one that pessimists outline. But if we're going to do that, we need to know what the problem is. And the problem doesn't fall within the paradigm of traditional economists who worry about things like the business cycle and why is it so slow to recover and why is there a jobless recovery and are we double dipping in the UK and so on. No, this is not a cyclical change that we're going through today. It's a secular change. It's a turning point in human history. Basically, the industrial age is coming to its logical conclusion. And this is the theme of my penultimate book. It's called Macroeconomics. By the way, if you want to get this book, the way to get it is in massive volume. Christmas is coming soon. I mean, you look like people with friends. No, seriously. If you look around today, you'll see a whole set of institutions that are in various stages of being stalled or frozen or in atrophy or even failing, contrasted with the contours of a set of sparkling new initiatives that show how this institution, this thing, this industry could be done very differently around a new communications medium and around a new set of principles. You know, the upper left there, the Industrial Age Corporation, typified by General Motors, America's greatest company, it basically went bankrupt. The financial system, Wall Street, the core modus operandi of Wall Street, almost brought down the global capitalist system. Now, it's not that there were bad people on Wall Street. My son works on Wall Street, and he's a good lad. But the modus operandi, the incentive systems, lead people to do inappropriate things. The last newspaper in the United States will be published sometime around the year 2030. Right? The problem that newspapers solve isn't really a problem anymore. I mean, Twitter is my newspaper. One youngster said to us, if the news is important, it will find me. I guarantee your newspaper is not going to be delivered to your door, your hotel room door, and made of atoms. Now, for every one of these institutions that's failing, we're moving to something new, and the transition's not that easy. So take the newspaper. How do we inform ourselves as a society in a world where the old means of doing so are collapsing? How do we have investigative journalism? How do we pay journalists? How do we have quality? How do we prevent this balkanization that's happening where we can all follow our own point of view? Is there a danger that we'll end up in some kind of self-reinforcing echo chambers where the purpose of information is not really to inform us, it's more to give us comfort? Now, I could go through all of these. I mean, each one's kind of an hour. Now, if you guys are up for it, I mean, we can do it. No, seriously. Our systems for solving global problems. We're not making much progress in the world. Are these problems too hard to solve? Or is our model wrong? Well, our model came out of 1944 in Bretton Woods and created the World Bank and the IMF, and a year later the UN, then UNESCO and the ISO and the WTO and the GATT, and then the G20 and the G8. Global institutions based on nation states. Maybe the nation state is the wrong size for solving these problems. Universities and schools. Every one of these is an industrial age model, where something at the top pushed out standardized units of some kind to passive recipients. Industrial age was an age of scale and of standardization. That was reflected in everything: mass production, mass distribution, mass marketing, mass media, mass education. Well, I think we have the very best model of learning in our schools and universities that 17th century technology can provide. Right? One way, one size fits all, centered on me, the teacher, and you're inert in the learning experience. I'm a teacher, I have knowledge. You're a student, you don't. Get ready. Here it comes. Teacher as transmitter. To me, the lecture is the process whereby the notes of a lecture go to the notes of a student without going through the brains of either. Now, I appreciate the irony that I'm standing up here giving you a lecture. But this actually isn't a great way of learning. I'm just trying to convince you of a couple of ideas. No one's going to remember the 16 institutions or the 5 principles that I'm about to tell you. So this is a time of contrast, of old institutions that are stalled and of new models being reborn. Now, before I get into it, into your industry a bit, let me go back even further, just for a second. I think if you want to understand what's happening today, again, with deference to Krugman, you don't go back to 1991 or 1982 or even the Great Depression. You need to go back earlier. All around the world, 150 years ago, we had feudal economies. And knowledge was tightly concentrated in tiny oligopolies of the church and the state. People didn't know about stuff. I mean, you were born, you lived your life, and you died. There was no sense of progress. Along comes Johannes Gutenberg with his great invention. And over time, parts of the society began to acquire knowledge. And when they did, the institutions of feudal agrarian society started to appear to be stalled or frozen or in atrophy or even failing. It didn't make sense for the church to be responsible for medicine when people had knowledge. It didn't make sense for a bunch of kings and nobles to be running things in Britain, to be running things in what's now the United States. So we had a whole period of disruption, the creation of nation states and revolutions all around the world. That's essentially what the American Revolution was. And then we saw the rise of these new institutions, the corporation, the modern university, science, eventually the Industrial Revolution, and it was all good. You know, Martin Luther called the printing press God's highest act of grace. The Industrial Revolution took us forward, and that model took us forward, but it came with a cost. And now, once again, we're all here today trying to understand the meaning of the fact that the technology genie is out of the bottle again. Only this time it's very different. The printing press gave us access to the written word. The internet enables each of us to be a publisher. The printing press gave us access to recorded knowledge. The internet gives you access to knowledge. Sure, you can go to the Google and ask it questions and so on. But more important, it gives you access to the intelligence contained in the crania of other people on a global basis. Collaborators, partners, employees, distributed, customers. This is not an information age. It's an age of collaboration. It's an age of participation, and it's an age of the networking of human intelligence. Now let's bring this down to earth a bit. Why is this happening? Well, Bernie really laid it out, and let me give you some evidence to support what he said. First of all, there's a technology revolution. The new web ain't your daddy's internet. Okay? First of all, you access it not through a PC tethered to a desktop, but through all kinds of inert objects that become smart communicating devices. My hotel room in DC here, the door has a chip in it, it's internetworked, and I know that the IT department in this company, the door has an IP address, which means that it's connected to the internet. The door is an internet appliance. I had a camera stolen from a hotel room in Miami, and the door knew about me. It knew who'd been in and out of the room. We actually found an unauthorized access. I have a friend in Toronto. Everything in his house that has electrical power has an IP address, and all these things talk to each other. You know, I have no idea what his refrigerator says to his toaster, but he was actually bragging that his fence talks to his sprinkler system. And I said, well, Ken, why would you care? He says, well, Don, if a burglar comes over the fence, the sprinkler's my first line of defense. So, I mean, this is pervasive ambient computing. We have broadband mobility, and this mobile device is so important. I don't know how to describe this. I was in Kenya in the Samburu land, and I met a 14-year-old goat herder. She didn't have electrical power. She didn't have water. She drank goat's milk, but she had a mobile device that could pull up a browser. Now, it's disruptive for her as well. I mean, she's 14, she's pregnant with her second child. She's married to some guy in his 60s who essentially purchased her for a bunch of goats. But she's got access to goat prices in the local markets. So the fact that we're connected at all times is such a huge thing. And overall, it's a good thing. Geospatiality. The old web, you surf websites. The new web, you surf physical reality. I can walk outside the door here and take layer with my iPhone or Google Glass and look at this building, and it'll tell me about the building. What do you want to know? You want to know about rates for conventions? No, I'm looking for an ATM. Well, there's one over there, just around the corner. So the old web, it was about websites. The new web, we have the intersection of the real world and the web. We have the rise of true multimedia and web services. So think of the internet as a computer. Do you remember Thomas Watson was famously to have said 60 years ago that the world will only need 5 computers? Then everyone made fun of him for many years. I think it was pretty close, wasn't he? You got the Amazon computer and the Google computer and the IBM computer. These are these clouds. Humanity is building a machine, and you're all involved in this. Every time you go onto Google and you do a search, you upload something onto the gram, Instagram or Pinterest, or you remix some music or something, you're programming this giant global computer that we all share. And finally, we have integration. The old web was separate from real IT. Even if you're a little company, you had your IT department, then you had the web. Well, now these come together. Now, I know it's not easy moving technology onto this big global computer, moving your apps and so on, because you all have this little detail called the legacy, right? The irresistible force of this new paradigm meets up against an immovable object of $4 trillion of installed base. I know some of you in this room have systems that are old enough to vote and drink, but and God may have created the world in 6 days, but he didn't have an installed base. And so this is a chance. I have to tell you, I've used that joke before, okay, full confession. And behind the screen was a window. I was in an office tower. And unbeknownst to me, a thunderstorm was shaping up. And I dutifully gave that joke. God may have created the world in 6 days, but he didn't have an installed base. And just as I said that, I kid you not, a lightning bolt cracked across the window. The whole room shook with thunder, and everybody's like, what's with that? Then they all burst into laughter. My only regret was we didn't capture it on video because I could have put it up onto YouTube. Tapscott gets endorsement from powerful source for a big idea or something like that. Anyway, this ain't your daddy's internet. Now, this technology revolution is intersecting with a demographic revolution. Who here is under the age of 34? Anybody? Okay, well, that's pretty good. Who has children or grandchildren under the age of 34? Hands, please. Okay, well, that's great. Well done. This is a good thing. I was in Italy recently, and I asked those 2 questions, and no hands went up. And I was tempted to say, you know what? Why don't we just end my talk now? Go home, light a candle, get a bottle of wine, make some babies, It's so important to have young people in an economy. Now, I started studying kids about 20 years ago when I noticed how my own children were effortlessly able to use all this sophisticated technology. And at first I thought, my children are prodigies. But then I noticed that all their friends were like them, so that was a bad theory. So I started working with 300 kids. In '97, I wrote this book. Well, flash forward to today. They're not just growing up digital, they've grown up. Bernie made this point. They're the now generation. They're coming into the workforce, into the marketplace, into society, and there's no more powerful force to change every institution than the first generation of digital natives. I'm a digital immigrant. I had to learn the language. And they have no fear of technology because it's not there. It's like the air. It's like I have no fear of a refrigerator because I don't really view it as technology. Now, let me just give you some demographics here. This is so important because in the investment industry, everyone talks about, like all these wealthy people and the biggest transfer of wealth ever is underway, and they're older people and we shouldn't care about these young people. Well, here's Exhibit A on why you should care. There are 78.5 baby boomers in the United States, 78.5 million baby boomers. There are 80 million of their children, the baby boom echo, born between 1978 and 1997 inclusive. This is the biggest generation ever. Based on their demographic muscle alone, these kids are going to dominate the 21st century. Now, what makes them a real force for change is not just their size, though. This is the first generation to come of age in the digital age, and these kids are different. Now, you notice how this cartoon didn't get a single chuckle? This is a cartoon from Growing Up Digital in 1997. When I put this cartoon up on the screen back then, people would fall off their chairs. They'd be laughing so hard. Whoa, a baby using a computer, that's so crazy. Now everybody looks at it like, what's that weird thing? Why doesn't the kid have an iPad or an iPhone or something like that? Why doesn't the kid have an iPod-y? I kid you not, I just found this last week. $45. There's a little Tupperware bowl too, so you can reuse it after your kid gets older. Ew. You know what? Time online for these kids is not taken away from hanging out with your friends, learning the piano, talking to your parents, or doing your homework. Time online is taken away from television. The baby boomers, my generation, watch 24 hours a week of TV. These kids watch less TV and they watch it differently. They come home, the boomers turned on the tube. These kids come home, they turn on their laptop and their mobile device, and they're listening to iTunes, and they're chatting away, and they got 3 magazines open, and maybe there's a video game. Oh yeah, and they're doing their homework at the same time. But the TV may be on, but it's in the background. It's like ambient media. It's sort of like music. And when they're online, what are they doing? Well, rather than being the passive recipients of somebody else's video, they're reading and organizing and authenticating and composing their thoughts and telling their stories and scrutinizing stuff and remembering things and so-called multitasking. This is changing the way an entire generation thinks, because a third of the human brain is developed between the ages of 8 and 18. It's called extended adolescence. And the number one variable determining what your brain is like, after your DNA, is how you spend your time. And if you spend 24 hours a week being the passive recipient of TV, like my generation did, you get a certain kind of brain. If you spend that time being the actor, the initiator, the composer, the handler, the organizer, then your brain is different. Now, I'm going to be doing a session at 11 o'clock for a smaller group, and I'd be happy, it's going to be more Q of A, and I'd be happy to get into this. We did a $4 million research project where we interviewed or surveyed 11,000 young people in 10 countries. And this whole negative thing about these kids are net addicted, glued to the screen, losing their social skills. The internet is eating the neocortex of youth today. They're Generation Me, that's the name of a book. We created a little army of narcissists. They just don't give a damn. They're into all this risky youth culture and blah, blah. I mean, it's a great stereotype, but there's no evidence to support it. We can be very hopeful about this generation. I think that we fear what we don't understand. This is, I sometimes interview young people in front of stages. This is it was a big audience like this. It was about 6,000, 7,000 people. Of 100 sessions, it was the highest rated, out of the mouths of babes. On the left there is Rahaf Harfouche. She was studying in Paris. Her boyfriend's in Toronto. They're apart for a year, so they turn on video Skype all day long to keep their relationship going. You know, they cook together across the ocean. I asked her, Rahaf, your generation, do you use email? She said, oh, no, Mr. Tapscott, email is kind of like yesterday's technology. And I said, well, if you did use email, what would you use it for? She says, email's sort of like formal technology, say for sending a thank you letter to one of your friend's parents. That would be a good use of email, I guess. I said to her, I just read a book called The Dumbest Generation. It says you guys are not only dumb, you're ignorant. I'll bet you don't read the newspaper. You probably don't watch the television news. I bet you get your news from Jon Stewart and The Daily Show on Comedy Central. Aren't we lost because of your generation? And she says, well, gee, Mr. Tapscott, I don't think that's a good stereotype. I think I'm informed and all my friends are, but she says, you're right. I don't read the newspaper, but Mr. Tapscott, she's putting it back to me. Have you ever seen one of those things, a newspaper? They come out once a day. They don't have hot links. They're not multimedia. And she says, you get this weird black stuff on your fingers. She says, let me tell you how I'm informed. She curates this whole information environment. She follows points of view she disagrees with because she wants to develop her thinking. She says, you are right, I don't watch the television news at night, but does anybody? Sam Donaldson told me a few years ago that the average age of the ABC nightly news is 64. And she says, you're also right, I watch The Daily Show, but not to get the news. I don't think The Daily Show would be funny unless you know the news. 2 down from her is Sherry Kong, an 20-year-old student from New Zealand. She was hired along with 80 other students. Their job, hired by the government, their job to teach the teachers how to use the internet in the classroom. I asked her, so Sherry, what are the teachers like as students? She says, the teachers on Mr. Tapscott, they're awful. They talk in class. They don't do their homework. I'm giving out pink slips all the time. Beside her is Michael Furtick. He was 28 at the time. He's kind of the granddaddy of them all. I've known Michael since he was 13 years old when he was the project manager on my website, growingupdigital.com. They made him the project manager as a 13-year-old because he was the oldest and most experienced on the team. When Michael was 15, his own website was getting 20 million page views a month, and he sold it for an undisclosed 7 or 8 figure sum. One of the news reports said it was probably only $1 million. And I sent him an email. I said, Michael, you sold it for $1 million. You should have called me. And he wrote back and he said, Don, legally, I can't tell you how much I sold it for, but I can tell you I'm very happy. And he didn't want the money to buy a Ferrari, although he bought a cheap little car, but his mom had to drive around with him because he only had his learner's permit. He wanted the money to invest in his next new venture. It's called takingitglobal.org. It's a social network of 400,000 young people who want to change the world. This is the first time in human history when children are an authority about something really important. I was an authority on model trains when I was 11. Today, the 11-year-old, your 11-year-old at the breakfast table is an authority on this digital revolution that's changing business, commerce, finance, government, entertainment, every institution in society. Rather than a generation gap, kids and parents get along pretty well today. Look at your iPod and your kid's iPod. There's overlap. My parents didn't even like the Beatles, let alone the Doors or something like that. What we have today is a generation lap, where kids are lapping their parents on the digital track. And if you have a teenager in your house, you know what I'm talking about. Who does the systems administration in your home? So this is humbling, and it's a formula for fear and for conflict. Don't be afraid. The kids are all right, and we can be very hopeful about them. If you're building a company, a government, a news organization, a democracy, a school, or whatever, these are the 8 norms of a generation. Freedom. They want to have choice. Choice is like oxygen. They want to customize everything. How do they get to customize their interaction and relationship with you? They're a generation of scrutinizers. When I was a kid, I saw a picture. It's a picture. These kids, like, what is it? A morph, an animation, a bot. I look at the cover of Vogue. I see a model. My daughter sees a Photoshop job. Gee, her cheekbones are bigger and her neck is longer. It's a generation with integrity. They do have very strong values. They want to collaborate. I was the passive recipient of everything when I was a kid. The org chart of the baby boomer family was mom reported to dad, and the kids reported to mom. I was kid number 1 of 5, which meant the dog reported to me. But, and the communications went this way. Father knows best. And I went to church on the weekend. I got broadcast to, and I watched television. I got broadcast to, and I went into the school, and a teacher broadcast to me. That was kind of my whole MO growing up. These kids have grown up interacting and collaborating. They want to have fun. Do you know that in the U.S., the kids we interviewed, over half of them said having fun with a product or service is as important as what the product or service does. How do you have fun with a mutual fund? It's a generation that wants things to happen fast, and they're a generation of innovators. Now, you put those two together, and you get a social revolution. Now, it's not just that there are 1 billion people on Facebook or 300 million, whatever, on Twitter. Social media is becoming a new means of production, and it's changing many, many things. One of the most important things is changing is something I've called emergence, or the rise of self-organization. People now can participate in everything in ways that were previously unthinkable. You can not only read the encyclopedia, you can write the encyclopedia. And self-organization is a powerful driver. Now, let me give you a story here. This is not a political story. It's a sort of social media story. It's about 6 years ago. Somebody sent me an email saying, you know, the senator from Illinois thinks your book, Wikonomics, is the key to winning the presidency and changing America. Go to myBarackObama.com. So I went there. Right on the screen, there was my book. It's like, we believe in the internet, the transparency, and the use of the internet. We believe in the book Wikonomics by Don Tapscott. He's saying, I'm asking you to believe not just in my ability to bring about real change in Washington, I'm asking you to believe in yours. And I looked at this thing, and, well, my first reaction was, I guess I am the man. Clearly. But I started spending some time there, and it turns out I'm not the man, because there was a Wikonomics community. There was also a Single Moms for Daycare for Obama community, and there was a Young Firefighters for Obama community. He created a platform whereby 35,000 communities self-organized, and that's what brought him to power. This is a revolutionary force. Now, and I use that term advisedly, because there's a revolution in revolutions that's underway right now. There was a big debate on the role of social media in social change. Malcolm Gladwell kind of started it all off with an article in the New Yorker that said, the revolution will not be tweeted. So I got involved in the debate. It was a good debate. And then it got settled by one word, Tunisia. Then there was another word, Libya, and another word, Egypt, and another word, Bahrain, and another word. I mean, it goes on and on. Now, social media didn't create the Tunisian revolution. It was created by a new generation of young people who wanted hope and who didn't want to be treated as subjects anymore. The social media didn't cause the revolution. It was caused by injustice and unemployment and oppression. But the media was key in ways that people don't understand. You know, during the Tunisian revolution, unarmed students were being killed by snipers from the old regime as they were demonstrating. So the kids would take their mobile device, take a picture of the sniper, triangulate the location, send it to friendly military units, because the military was split in a pre-revolutionary situation, and those military units would come in and take out the sniper. You think that social media is about hooking up online? For these kids, it was a tool of self-defense. Up until things fell apart a year ago in Syria, what happened is, you're demonstrating in the street, you get injured, you get taken to a hospital by an ambulance. You go into the hospital with a broken leg, and you come out with a bullet in your head. Assad was using the regime to kill people and using the hospital system to kill people. So these two youngsters created an alternative emergency healthcare system on Twitter, where you get injured, you get picked up, because tweets go out, and then you get taken to a makeshift medical clinic where you get medical attention as opposed to being executed. So I know that this is very disturbing, and it's ugly, and we all wonder what the heck is going on over there, but I'm convinced that this is moving in the right direction. The arc of history is a positive one, and this is moving forward. You know, the train has left the station on freedom. The cat is out of the bag. The horse is out of the barn. Help me out here. The toothpaste is out of the tube. We're not going back. Now, we need to fix some problems in the world now, though. And you're business people, but business can't succeed in a world that's failing. These are protests around the world. 2002, 2003, 2004. 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, these 2013. These are the protests that we know about. In China, there are thousands of protests that are happening in cities all around China constantly. We told young people, you stay out of trouble, you work hard, you graduate, you be a good kid, and you can have a prosperous life. I'm not sure that we were so accurate on that. And we have to fix this problem. The jobless recovery, that's an oxymoron. You know, it's a contradiction in terms. There is no recovery unless it's inclusive. You know, oxymoron, it's like scented deodorant or jumbo shrimp or, you know, military music or, I don't know, safe sex. I mean, there is no such thing. And we need to fix this problem. Okay, so let's get down to business. This is creating a huge change in the business environment. The corporation is changing. Now, this is the most influential economist for me on my work, and he died a month ago. His name was Ronald Coase, and he asked a deceptively simple question 70 years ago in a paper. He said, why does the firm exist? He said, if Adam Smith is right, and the open market's the best mechanism to determine how goods and resources and people and so on are allocated, why isn't everybody an independent contractor at every step along the way in production? Why do we have firms, corporations? And he said the answer is, and he won a Nobel Prize for saying this, the answer is collaboration costs, the costs of search in an open market. This is 70 years ago. The costs of finding all the right information and people to do something be prohibitive. So we bring that inside the boundaries of a corporation where we have things like filing cabinets to find information and org charts to find people. And the industrial age was an age of vertically integrated corporations that did everything from soup to nuts. Why? Because the costs of collaborating in an open market were greater than the costs of bringing things inside the boundaries of the corporation. Well, 20 years ago, I wrote a book called Paradigm Shift. Some of you may remember that. And back then I said, no, look, the boundaries of the corporation are becoming more porous because of technology. Back then we called it the extended enterprise. Then we saw the rise of the internet, and companies began to unbundle further into focused companies. Our poem back then was, you focus on what you do best and you partner to do the rest. And now the internet is dropping transaction and collaboration costs so much that peers can come together and create value. Peers in the sense of peers outside the boundaries of traditional companies, and peers in the sense of companies working together as peers rather than as superiors and subordinates in a supply chain. So think about this. If you can create an encyclopedia with 2 million people, it's in 20 times bigger than Britannica. It's in 240 languages, but according to the big study that's been done, the quality is just as good. What else could you create? Could you create a computer operating system that way? Well, who here has heard of Linux, the Linux operating system? Okay. Excuse me. Linux is now the dominant operating system in the world. Nobody owns it. It's created by volunteers. Peer-produced. Could you create a physical good? Well, the Chinese motorcycle industry is dozens of little companies, and they all cooperate together. You make ignition systems, and you do wheels, and you do aftermarket support and service, and you're marketing, and so on. There's no OEM. There's no Harley Davidson that's pulling all the strings. This is now 40% of the global motorcycle industry, and get ready for the peer-produced car, $1,000, using the same model. So this is a time of very profound change in the deep structure and architecture of the corporation. And that's why everybody is talking about entrepreneurship. So this is cough syrup. It is not tequila. So 4 huge drivers. You put that together with the global economic crisis, and we have a burning platform. We have to change. Do you know the idea of a burning platform? You're somewhere where the costs of staying where you are become much greater than the cost of moving to something new. You're on an oil rig, it's on fire, you got to get off. Even though the new state may not be fully known. We have a burning platform for change. We have to start making very deep changes to all of these institutions. So let me pull this together for you and close by talking about 5 principles for rebuilding business, and for that matter, our society. Collaboration, openness or transparency, sharing of some intellectual property, interdependence, and integrity. Now, by collaboration, I'm not talking about a bunch of nice people sitting together in a room. I'm talking about collaboration that can occur on an astronomical scale. So this guy here, his name is Rob McEwen. And the reason I know this story is because he's my neighbor in Toronto. He moved across the street from me and he held a cocktail party to meet the neighbors. And he said, "You're Don Tapscott. I've read some of your books." I said, "Great." I said, "What do you do?" And he says, "Well, I used to be a banker and now I'm a gold miner." It's a funny guy. He introduces his wife to the group. He says, "My wife Cheryl, she's a gold digger." Thankfully, she's not. And she also has a sense of humor. Anyway, he tells me this amazing story. He takes over this gold mine in northern Canada, and his geologist can't tell him where the gold is. It gives them millions of dollars to get more geological data. They can't tell him where to go into production. He does this again and again. After a while, he's ready to give up. But one day he has an epiphany. He wonders, if my geologists don't know where the gold is, then maybe somebody else does. So he does a radical thing. He takes his geological data, which in the mining industry is your biggest secret. It's kept in high security computer systems. He publishes it, and he holds a contest on the internet called the Gold Corp Challenge. It's basically $500,000 in prize money for anyone who can tell me, do I have any gold? And if so, where is it? He gets 77 submissions. They come from all around the world. They use techniques that he's never heard of. And for his $500,000 in prize money, my neighbor, Rob McEwen, finds $3.4 billion worth of gold. The market value of his company goes from $90 million to $10 billion. And I can tell you, because he's my neighbor, he's a happy camper. What did he do? He collaborated in the sense of he peered. You see, conventional wisdom says that talent is inside our boundaries, right? Your most precious asset goes out the elevator every night. Well, for Rob McEwen, the uniquely qualified minds to solve his problem were outside the boundaries of his company. He built an idea agora. Okay, this is a term that I use. The Roman and Greek agora is a marketplace for ideas or for uniquely qualified minds. He peered. You know, he should have fired his geology department, right? No, he wondered who are their peers. Many of the best submissions didn't come from geologists. They came from computer scientists, engineers, and all kinds of others. The winner was a computer graphics company that built a 3-dimensional model of the mine. He peered, he collaborated, and increased the value of his company. While Gold Corp is worth over $30 billion today, increased the value of his company by 2 orders of magnitude. Procter & Gamble, 60% of their innovation comes from outside the company. How could you better build a network? There are new tools now for doing this. Inno360 enables you to build an innovation ecosystem by digging down into the deep web. Only 20% of the web is searchable by Google, and finding the people and the resources and information necessary to do just about anything. This is a book. I wrote the foreword to the book, and it was a best-selling book, but I wasn't involved in the writing of the book because it was written by 1,500 people on a wiki. This book just kind of happened, and a publisher tapped into it. There are these pools of labor outside the boundaries of your company that you can tap into. This is a great story. Full disclosure here. My daughter and the woman on the left there, Joanna Griffiths, are best friends. And they went to the business school called INSEAD outside Paris, and they won the entrepreneurship competition. And so they set up this business, and they did a Kickstarter. It was actually an Indiegogo campaign to fund it. And the business is, they're reinventing women's underwear. This is high-tech, multitasking underwear. Your underwear should do more. Don't ask. Anyway, but what happened was they raised the money that they wanted, and as they were getting close to the end, their largest potential retailer got wind of this, came in, bought up all their inventory, did an exclusive deal, and now this company is like it's fabulous, and it's taking off. Young people naturally looking to other ways of funding things than traditional ways. And let's face it, venture capital is pretty much broken in the United States. And of course, the big banks aren't lending money to small companies because they still have the hangover from the subprime mortgage mess. You can turn your customers into producers, even for physical goods. This is a clothing company called Threadless, where their customers create their products. And they never manufacture anything until there's a big market demand for it. You can even get your customers to create your advertising. Does anybody know about the Doritos Crash the Super Bowl contest? Not really? Okay. Doritos said to its customers, you create ads for us, 30 seconds, the best ones will run on the Super Bowl. This was an ad created by a couple of young women who were nobodies. They're somebodies now, because their ad ran on the Super Bowl.
Paper or plastic?
Paper's fine.
I like these. Nacho cheese. Old school. Fiery habanero? Yeah. Those are hot. Oh. Salsa verde. Oh. Blazing buffalo and ranch? Giddy up. Gonna need a cleanup on register 6.
Ew. Now, you can imagine some of these ads were a little edgy and never got on the Super Bowl, but one of the more edgy ones did, and I'm going to show it to you now. This actually ran on the Super Bowl. I mean, what ad agency is going to dress someone up in a mouse suit and have them beat up your customer? But apparently for the Doritos demographic, that works really well. So another important thing, especially for small businesses, but for everybody, is if electronic mail is a great technology for sending a thank you letter to one of your friend's parents, how do you get beyond that to these new industrial strength social networks for the enterprise? This is one, Moxie, Jive's a market leader. Google's now got a whole collaborative work system platform. SAP has a product called Jam. This is the new operating system for the 21st century organization. People say, what should I do to move forward? I say the number one thing is it starts at home. Personal use is a precondition for any kind of comprehension. Besides getting yourself a reverse mentor, a teenager or somebody in their 20s, implement one of these platforms. Okay, theme number 2, openness. Now here I'm talking about transparency. When we think of transparency, normally we think of WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. But I think that that's really the tip of the iceberg, because transparency is this powerful new force in the economy, because people at their fingertips have these tools for finding out what's going on, for informing others, for organizing collective responses. You say you have good performance, you got to have good performance. So This was the theme of a book I wrote 10 years ago that my mother bought most of the copies. It was sort of a study in bad timing. But we argued that corporations are becoming naked. And if you're going to be naked, there's some corollaries that flow from that. One is, well, fitness is no longer optional. Or if you're going to be naked, you better be buff. Meaning you need to have good value, because value is evidence like never before, but you need to have values that are part of your DNA and your bones. Well, nothing so powerful as an idea's time has come. TED has now themed all of TED around this idea of openness. And I gave the opening talk. You can check it out online. Then I wrote a TED, and then I wrote a book, a TED book based on that. Here's the idea. If you are buff or you're becoming buff, transparency is a force for growth and success and trust. When you open up the kimono, good things happen. Including good things happen to you, because sunlight is the best disinfectant. You got to get yourself kind of cleaned up. You know the book Dress for Success? You can sort of undress for success. I'll just give you an example. We don't have time to go into this, but transparency with employees. Tell them what's really going on. Be open and honest. Increases trust. It drops internal transaction and collaboration costs. It improves loyalty. We've seen reduction in office politics, game playing, all of that. Transparency is not something to be feared. It's something to be embraced. Theme number 3 is sharing. Now, this is different than openness or transparency. This is about giving up assets, actual intellectual property. IBM embraced Linux. Most of the computer companies thought Linux was some new form of communism. IBM embraced it. They gave away $400 million to the Linux community. In doing so, they created a platform on which they built a multi-billion-dollar business, and they saved themselves $900 million a year developing their own proprietary operating system. So it turns out that you need a portfolio of intellectual property, some that you own and protect, and some that you may put in an exchange, like Nike has put 400 patents about sustainability into the green exchange on the idea that a rising tide lifts all boats, and some that you may actually place in a commons and share. And there are all kinds of opportunities for sharing in this industry where a rising tide can lift all boats. Every industry is going through this. It's a good way of evaluating companies. How much are they getting with the program? Take the pharmaceutical industry. They're falling off a patent cliff this year, losing 30%, roughly, of their revenue in 1 year. Imagine that. You're going to lose 30% of your revenue. What do? You know, cut back on paper clips or something? No. They have to change the whole modus operandi of the industry. And led by GlaxoSmithKline, they're placing, slow, but it's happening, they're placing clinical trial data in a commons. And this will be a wonderful thing. It's going to make the industry profitable and will help us break up the logjam that exists right now, because there aren't a lot of big developments in medicine in the pipeline. This can change that. The sharing economy is now such a big deal. There was a cover story 3 months ago in The Economist, and it points to all of these things that are called excess capacity. How much do you use of your vacation home or your truck or your boat or your driveway or your attic or your dog? And sharing's happening everywhere, and it's big business. Buzzcar, created by Robin Chase after she created Zipcar. It's about sharing automobiles. The technology is there to enable that to occur. We've got stuff like Uber. I'm sure most of you have been in it. TaskRabbit. You can just get somebody to do anything pretty much for you. Who's going to get me a beautiful bouquet of flowers? Or who will do my shopping for me? Or who will cut my lawn? Airbnb and couch surfing in some countries, Scandinavia, are as big as the entire hotel industry. And this is now going upscale. This is a company, full disclosure, I've gone on the board, that's for people who love to travel but also have vacation assets. If you're like me, I've got a couple of vacation properties and I use them a tiny percent of the time. Well, now, because the internet drops transaction and collaboration costs, these can be shared in a way that you can be sure that your asset is not going to be hurt if someone uses it. So that's a big change. Then we have the rise of what I would call interdependence. There are 4 pillars of society, and increasingly these need to work together better. Business can't succeed in a world that's failing. We have the state, we have the private sector, we have the civil society, and there's a new pillar. It's called you. You can be a pillar. 2 kids in Boston can go onto the Ushahidi network, and during the Haitian earthquake, they can find a 7-year-old buried in the rubble under a shopping center. She's been there 4 days. She's dying. She gets out a little message in Creole. They triangulate it, translate it, inform the authorities her life is saved. So those 2 young people are pillars of society helping solve a global problem, because the Haitian earthquake aftermath was a global problem. Right now, this is going down big time in the Philippines, where people are self-organizing, or you have multi-stakeholder networks that involve all of these different players that are bringing about change. And I just want to say something controversial. You know, and Bernie mentioned this, being aware of regulation. We need to work more closely with governments to ensure that regulation is good. Because Lord knows there's lots of bad regulation and there's lots of bureaucracy. But regulation per se is not the problem. I'll give you just a good example of that. The whole subprime mortgage mess, the Canadian banks avoided that. And I was talking to a guy named Gordon Exton, he's the CEO of RBC, one of the banks in Canada. It went from number 22 in North America to number 5 over the past 5 years. And I said, boy, you must be pretty proud of yourself avoiding the subprime thing. And he said, not really. The structure of the mortgage market's different in Canada. The regulation prevented us from doing all the crazy things. And if you look at the safest banks in North America, the top 6 are Canadian. The strongest banks in North America, 5 of the top 6 are Canadian. So the problem is not regulation. We need to start to find new ways of working together. And the final theme is integrity. Integrity is about doing the right thing. And it has 3 values. Honesty, tell the truth. You're considerate of the interests of the others. You're not just trying to sell stuff to your clients. You actually really deeply care about their success, or your employees or others, investors. And accountability, you abide by your commitments. And along with transparency, this is the foundation of trust. What is trust? Well, I think I can say it in a sentence. Trust is the expectation that the other party will act with honesty, consideration, accountability, and they'll be open. So doing the right thing is so key. Just a quick little story. Royal Caribbean, this is years ago, they got into a lot of trouble because they were dumping oil and toxins into the sea. This is a big problem when all of your marketing is about the sea and the beauty of the sea. So the CEO had to quit. They brought in a new man of great integrity, and he said, I'm going to figure out what happened. He stood up in front of the world after a couple of months, and he said, it's true. We were polluting the sea. And this is a violation of everything that we believe in. And I'm here to tell you, this will never happen again. 3 weeks later, Royal Caribbean is found to be systematically pushing oil and toxins into the sea. What's going on here? He's a man of great integrity. They have a value statement, the company. You got to bake it into your bones, into your DNA, into your IT, business processes, compensation system. Engineers on boats were being comped for cost control. And people do what you paid them to do. They found that by bypassing the pollution control devices, they could save hundreds of thousands of dollars. So Royal Caribbean had to go back to the drawing board, and they rebuilt the whole company from the bottom up based on principles of integrity. And they're now a fantastic company, and they're doing really great. So 5 principles, a new communications medium. We need to rebuild all of these institutions around these principles. And you have a role to play, not just in your business, but everywhere. You see, because when you get a paradigm shift, you get a crisis of leadership. And vested interests fight against change, and leaders of old models are often the last to embrace the new. The good news is, I've studied thousands of organizations. Leadership can come from the top, but it can come from anywhere. And that means it's each of our personal opportunity if we will it. Well, you know, you look today towards all the doomsayers, and I think that if we do this, if we work hard, all become involved by the millions, bringing our legitimate expectations to the table, then the future can be a much brighter one. Let me just end with a little story. It's actually a little bit of science. Over the past few years, I've been studying nature to try and better understand what an age of networked intelligence might look like. And fish come in schools, bees come in swarms, starlings over the moors of England come in something called a murmuration. Have you ever heard that word? Murmuration. It refers to the murmuring of the wings of the birds. And at night, the starlings are out over a 20-mile radius, sort of doing their starling thing. And then they come together, and they create one of the most spectacular things in all of nature. Now, the murmuration has a purpose. It's not just for show. It warms the birds up for the cold night ahead, and it protects the birds from predators. Look on the right there is a hawk, a fearsome predator being chased away by the collective power of the little birds. Scientists that have studied this say they've never seen an accident. There's leadership, but there's no one leader. Now, is this some kind of fanciful analogy, or could we actually learn something from this? This murmuration functions according to these 5 principles. It's a big collaboration. There's an openness. It's based on some rules, the big one being don't bump into anybody else. There's a huge sharing of all kinds of information about food sources, trajectory, danger. There's an interdependence. Remember, I said business can't succeed in a world that's failing. This thing functions as if the individual birds understand that their interests are tied into the interests of the collective. And it has a great integrity that sort of gives the birds this great courage to individually take on a fearsome predator because they know there's power in the murmuration as a whole. So imagine for a second, imagine if we could connect ourselves on this planet through some kind of vast network of glass and air. Could we go beyond just sharing information? Could we start to maybe share our intelligence? Could we create some kind of collective intelligence or some kind of consciousness that goes beyond a little team or a company or a work group or a community? If we could do that, we could do some wonderful things. Remember Peter Senge and the learning organization? It never happened. Organizations couldn't learn. Maybe they're like people. People can't learn unless they're conscious. Maybe the precondition was missing. I mean, when I give talks, I try and be entertaining and tell stories and stuff because I find that people learn more when they're conscious. Well, during the Egyptian revolution in the early days, Hosni Mubarak was so strong, and many people said, he's too strong. He's going to crush the kids. They're going to give up. They can't keep coming out by the hundreds of thousands and millions every day. And I wrote at the time, I don't think they will go home because if they do, he will hunt them down and he will kill them. Just as if this thing breaks up, those predators can have their prey. So I look at this thing and I get a lot of hope that this smaller world our kids inherit might actually be a better one, and that this age of networked intelligence might be an age where promise is fulfilled and where peril is unrequited. Let's do this. Thank you.